In the last video, we talked about regulation, how to read a rider who's too activated to learn, how to bring them back into their performance zone through the horse, through rhythm, and through pace. If you haven't watched that one yet, go watch it first. So now you have 4 pillars working: structure, observation, feedback, and regulation. Here's the one that almost always gets cut. The lesson runs long. The hour is up. You give a quick, good job to the rider dismounts, and you're already thinking about your next student. And everything you just taught starts leaking away. Because learning doesn't finish when the horse stops. It finishes when the rider's brain makes sense of what just happened. That's the 5th pillar, integration. What you need is 2 minutes. You ask 3 questions, and they decide whether anything from today is still in the body next week. Why the last 2 minutes matter so much? And here's something every sport coach knows. What you do in the few minutes right after a training session largely decides whether the learning sticks or disappears. The brain is still open, still processing, right after a new experience. If you close the session without giving it those few minutes, the experience just fades. Not because the rider didn't try, because the brain never finished the job. I'm sure you've seen it. The rider who had a major breakthrough in the lesson and shows up the following week like it never happened. You're not starting over because they forgot. You're starting over because the learning never fully locked in. Now, most riding lessons end without giving the brain that window. 2 minutes in the end of every lesson can change that dramatically. Here's how you do it. Before you ask anything, look at the horse. At the end of a well-run lesson, the horse tells you something. Head low, breathing out, back loose, maybe even licking and chewing. The whole body is quieter than when you started. That's not just a nice sign, that's evidence. Something landed. The rider and the horse found something together. Point to it. Look at the horse. What do you notice? Most riders have never been asked that question. And the moment they really look, something shifts. They come out of their head. They're grounded, they're present, they're ready to reflect. If the horse is still tight at the end, head up, not settled, that's information too. The lesson closed before the regulation did. Take 30 more seconds of walk before you start to debrief. Let the horse settle first, then you ask. Either way, the horse gives you your opening, and then you can start asking these 3 questions. Now, I've been asking these 3 questions at the end of lessons for years. It wasn't a system, just because they work. And the order of the questions really matters. What did you feel your biggest improvement today? You start with progress, not with your corrections, not with what still needs work. Progress first. This isn't about being nice. It's about how the brain stores experiences. When a rider names a moment of progress out loud in their own words, the brain holds onto it better. And they're also building something else, the ability to find their own improvement without you pointing it out. That's a skill that makes rider keep getting better between lessons. Ask it, then wait. Don't answer for them. Let them find it. Here's the second question. What was the hardest moment? Now you go to the difficulty. Hard moments in a riding lesson are usually where the real learning happened, even when it didn't feel like it. Naming it reduces its weight. The brain stops carrying it as something that went wrong and starts processing it as information. You also found out exactly where to focus next time. Not based only on what you saw, but on what the student felt. Here's the third question. What's one thing you want to carry with you? Not everything, just one thing. This is the most important question and the one most instructors skip. Choosing forces the brain to consolidate. When the rider has to pick one thing, they have to decide what mattered most. That act of deciding is what locks it in. It also gives you a thread for the next lesson. Last week you said you wanted to stay softer through the transition. How did that feel today? That's not just continuity. That's a rider who is starting to coach themselves. Here's how you use these 3 questions. Here's the part most instructors miss. By the end of every lesson, you already have your own answers. You've been watching. You know where the real breakthrough was. You know what was hard, and you know what deserves to be remembered. But you don't lead with that. You ask first. You listen first. Because what the rider felt and what you observed are both true, and both matter. Sometimes what they say will surprise you. You saw one breakthrough. They felt a different one. That's not a problem, that's a conversation. And that conversation is how you build a rider who eventually stops depending on you to tell them when they're getting it right. Try this in your next lesson. At the end of your next 3 lessons, before the rider walks away, ask the 3 questions. Where did you feel your biggest improvement? What was the hardest moment? And what's one thing you want to carry with you? Don't set them up. Don't explain the system. Just ask. Now, the first time, riders look a little surprised. Most have never been asked. By the 3rd time, they're ready for the question before you even ask. Here's what those 3 questions are actually building. A rider who can name where they improved is building self-awareness. A rider who can sit with a hard moment without avoiding it is building resilience. A rider who can choose one thing and carry it forward is building focus. Now, those aren't just riding skills, they're life skills. And the horse is why they stick. Because nothing in a riding lesson is abstract. It happens in a body, on a moving animal, under real pressure. You can't fake a canter transition. You can't think your way through a spook. Whatever the rider learned, they learned it for real. The student who learns to debrief a riding lesson can debrief a hard exam, a job interview that went sideways, a team project that fell apart. Most instructors never name this. They ask the questions and move on. But naming it once, briefly, is what makes the lesson worth more than an hour on a horse. That's what makes parents renew. That's what makes students stay. And that's what the RISE course teaches. Not just the 5 pillars, how to name what your lessons are already doing. So your riders know what they're building, and so you know what your teaching is worth. If you want to know more about our course, there's a link in the description. So now that we have the 5 pillars, I've put together a reference card. You have all 5 pillars, including what we just spoke about, the 3 questions, the right order, and what to listen for in each answer. It's a free download and it's here in the description. So now that we're done with the 5 pillars, our next video is where all 5 pillars come together. We'll take a real stuck lesson, a teenager, a rising trot that suddenly stopped working, and run it through the full diagnostic. You'll see exactly which pillar broke and how each one gets applied. That's video 6. I'll see you there. Now remember, growing your business doesn't come from more lessons. It comes from being worth more in each one of them. If you like this video, please give us a like and don't forget to subscribe